It's just awful. Like, it's just like, if you were like me, I'm just like, don't do it.
Yeah.
You're making a stupid choice.
I think that Ellie doesn't want to do it.
Okay, so today is the 1-year anniversary of Last of Us 2. We have a lot to talk about today, obviously, with the game this big. I want to remind everyone before we get into this, like, subscribe to the channel. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you're just watching, then that's great too. What are your overall thoughts about the game? Did you love it? Like, for me, it's one of my favorite games.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it overall. Like, if you said, hey, give me a yes or no answer, do you love it? Do you hate it? I'd say that I love it.
So I want to get into a couple things today. I want to just basically talk about the game, different points, what we thought about it. The game opens pretty big, and it opens in a spot where, you need to know what happens at the end of the last one. It's just part of it. It's an ongoing story, and it's basically the center point of the game. And it's kind of everyone's motivation was Joel's big decision at the end of game 1. So he starts out, it's Joel and Tommy. They're talking about, and Joel is telling Tommy, look, I made a decision with Ellie. They were going to do something that could possibly have saved the human race for all he knows. I mean, you just never know.
Yeah.
You'll just never know. And, Tommy's like, a great brother. He's like, man, I will not tell anyone.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes from there, right? And it feels like your usual game where you're going to play as Joel, you're going to play as Ellie again, maybe a little bit more on Ellie because she's on the cover of the box, but then Joel dies immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, he dies probably 3 hours into the game or less, depending on how much searching you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of stunning because I believe based on the leaks that came out about this game, because for those of you who don't know, this game leaked big time. And it was really only the first half of the game, but it leaked big time online. And Joel dying really early is one of the things that really rubbed people the wrong way about it. Oh. And it's another one of those things where it's like, it's a little stunning. It's a gut punch moment. Because not only is this the character you were playing as the entire first game, but it's also like the character you love the most. Yeah, you like Ellie, but you don't have that connection with her in the same way. You care about her from the first game, but it's not quite the same.
You relate because you spent so much time in the first game relating to Joel.
Yep.
Because he's such a morally gray character.
Yep.
And you don't really get to know much about Ellie as far as what her morals are, her personality, fears like that. And so you feel connected to Joel in a way that I'm sure you see parts of that in yourself too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another part of it is like, so a lot of people found that out early. And it's just long enough into the game to where it's like annoyingly long to get to it. Like if you would already know it's coming. And then the other part of it is like once you get there, like then it's like you have to recover from it because you don't know it's coming. So now you have to think, all right, well, then it's like, all right, now you have to kind of like recover from it, realize that you're going to be Ellie the whole game, and then move forward. Yeah. And then later in the game, you have to recover again because it's like full stop, you're not going to be Joel anymore. You're going to be Ellie. And then again, full stop, now you're going to be this completely other person who you don't even know, who you have to get. And one of the beautiful things about the game is that they do a good job of making you care about these characters. Like you really care about Ellie by the time you get to the theater. You really care about Abby.
Or at the very least, you understand them.
Right.
Yeah, whether you give a shit about Abby, you at least understand her.
There's a lot of people online so far who are like, yeah, by the time it came to the final showdown between Ellie and Abby, once we finally met back at the theater, I was kind of like, man, who am I rooting for? Yeah. And that's, it's the first thing we're talking about because it's kind of the elephant in the room.
Sure.
Like it's
It's
just happened so early. How did Joel's death hit you when you were playing? Was it like, oh my God?
So
were you spoiled?
No, I wasn't spoiled. I stayed away from if I saw The Last of Us on a headline, I immediately closed the internet browser. I'm like, I'm not even going to risk it.
I did the same. I was like dodging it like I was Neo.
So I think about this all the time. The first time I'd ever seen anything like that happen was in Game of Thrones, and I'm sure people will forever compare things like this to Game of Thrones. The Red Wedding scene, where you think, momentum is moving in a positive direction, and then all of a sudden, like a character just gets his throat slit and he's dead, and a second and a half before it happened didn't see it coming, and then the episode ends and your jaw's just on the floor, like, oh my gosh. And that's kind of what it was for me when Joel died. I wasn't angry. I was just stunned.
Did you think he was going to die there?
No.
No, I didn't either.
So when she shot his knee out, I was like, my first instinct was like, he's not going to recover from that. Like at the very least,
remainder of because it's bad. Like you can see his bone hanging out.
Like at the very least, for the remainder of the game, he's going to be missing a leg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the very least. And then, when she hit him with that final swing of the club, I was like, I'm pretty sure you don't get up from something like that. Like, I'm pretty
it's unclear.
sure he's dead. Yeah,
it's unclear, and then it's clear, I guess, because Ellie is like screaming bloody murder.
Yeah. And then the next scene, there, she's at his gravestone, his epitaph, and things like that.
And they play that death scene so well.
Yeah.
I mean, they hit you with the weight of the moment, and then they carry it because now you're Ellie at the gravesite, and everything is somber. Everyone's feeling it.
Yeah.
Tommy's coming to you, talking about it. He's like, I don't know, my wife's telling me not to go. And Ellie's like, that Joel would be out there already. I don't even know why this is a discussion. We're doing this. Yeah. And it's just, it's so of the world. Yeah. And it's so, for Ellie, she doesn't know the usual world like Joel and Tommy do.
Right.
So for her, revenge is just like, this is what you do.
Yeah.
Someone fucks with you, you have to go back and mess with them back.
And you hear bits and pieces where Ellie will say, oh, Joel told me about this. Joel had mentioned this. And so it's like reading a textbook in class. Like you know that things are this way out there, but you don't really have the reality or the understanding of it because she hadn't experienced it yet.
Yeah. And again, it's a gut punch because they really play it like you're not going to see Joel again in this game.
Right.
And that's clearly not what happens.
No.
And again, I think that's why some people gave up on this game and were like, this game sucks. Mm-hmm. It takes you about 2.5 hours, which is about the length of a normal, pretty long movie, just to get to the death scene, something you may have already heard about. Mm-hmm. And then they play it, again, with the weight of the moment, and then you're like, maybe I never see him again. Now, as the game goes on, you find out that they play with time. Mm-hmm. Joel comes back. I believe you even play as him once or twice later on. Because you play as him briefly in some of the museums and stuff.
In her birthday scene, yeah.
Yeah. And so you do get back to him, but there's no way of you knowing that beforehand. Right. So I could see really being annoyed by that. And the relationship with Ellie and Joel it's really great. Like they play it, it's complicated. Yeah. It's layered, which is not something you get in many video games. You don't even get that kind of layering in a lot of like TV show series or movies. Yeah.
And this, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but this is one thing I was thinking about. The relationship that Joel and Ellie had in the first game was the reason we loved it so much is because it actually felt like two people learning each other and coexisting in a space where there was frustration. There was also, forgiveness and things like that. And then we were just completely robbed of it in this game.
The first game is very good at framing Joel's mindset about things. Yeah. The very first thing you do in that game is you lose the daughter.
Yeah.
And then you see him not want to care about Ellie because of how much that hurt him. And then in the end, he's like, okay, I'll let this girl in. She'll be my world again, just like my daughter was.
And it was a very slow, painstaking process.
Yes, it's very slow throughout the whole game. And then at the end, he's like, I am not going through that again. Yeah. And the whole thing is framing his final decision, which is the center point of this game. And it's just a beautiful thing to build off of.
And so that's what I was thinking, like, because the flashbacks, you get to see that, especially in the scene you were playing a second ago where she escapes to Utah and breaks into the hospital. And she finally has that ultimatum that she gives Joel. She's like, you either tell me the truth or I'm gone.
Yeah.
That, I wish, and this is as I was going back and playing the game again, like, I wish, all the complaints and the criticisms that people have against this game, how you have to play as Abby, oh my gosh, Joel's gone, I wanted to play as Joel. Those are fair criticisms, and I think it would have been if we would have had a game like the experiences that Ellie is having in these flashbacks, right, where she's trying to learn what actually happened, and she's trying to wrestle with how she feels about Joel. It would have been amazing if we had a game just of that experience, right?
Yeah.
You have a full,
which we kind of got because if you think about Ellie's part and you kind of get Abby's part, like honestly, if you were to separate those into two different games, I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's long.
Sure.
Not only is it long enough,
Yeah.
but there's enough character
Right.
character building
Yeah.
to, that's its own game.
Yeah. I would have loved to have had a whole 30-hour, 40-hour game of Ellie wrestling with Joel. And we get to see it in the flashbacks. I just wish we would have gotten to have a whole game of a little bit more. Yeah.
That's one of the beautiful things about this game. To me, things that are great leave you wanting more.
Yeah.
And this game does that. You're like, well, I wish there was a little bit more here, and I wish there was a little bit more here.
Yeah.
Oh man, does it nail that?
Yeah.
So I really like the Joel and Ellie relationship. How did you feel about Abby? Did you end up liking her?
Yeah, I never had a problem with her. I actually had no problems with her at all. I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, this is the girl that killed Joel, and now you want to make me sympathize with her. I was like,
that's a tough ask. That's a big ask by the writers.
Well, it kind of doesn't make sense to, like, I understand it, but I'm like, the whole reason the end of the first game was significant was because you know that Joel did something bad.
Perhaps.
It affected a lot of people negatively at the end of the game. And so, like, why are you surprised that someone responded in that way? Because from Abby's perspective, it makes sense. This guy robbed humanity of a savior, killed my dad. Like, of course she's going to be like that. I don't know why that surprised anybody.
Especially in this world where covering your ass and, getting yours over the other guy, which eventually is just revenge. And all things said and done, it's just revenge.
Yeah. And then I thought her character development was good. It made sense to me.
I think she grows a lot more than Ellie in this game.
Oh, of course. Ellie
because we're going to talk about Abby and Lev later.
Yeah. But
she shows major growth in that area. And even at the end with Ellie, although like they still like, don't fuck with me. I don't want you around me, but I'm fine or whatever.
Yeah, I think Abby experiences some real growth, and Ellie, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but Ellie's the one who it doesn't end well for her.
No.
Yeah, she doesn't climb mountains.
It doesn't really end well for anybody.
Yeah.
In this game, but it is what it is. So I wanted to talk about Abby and Owen's relationship.
Sure.
It's an interesting thing that they tease basically right from the start, right? Because you start the game and you're Ellie, and something's going on with Ellie and some girl you don't know, and then a guy that greets you at the door.
And for some reason, she's pissed at Joel.
Right, and she may or may not be pissed at Joel. Something weird happened. There's something in the air, at least. And then you cut to a girl and a guy who you don't know who end up being Owen and Abby.
Yeah.
And, they have history. You don't know much about it. They clearly know each other pretty well.
Sure.
And that's a relationship that they build on pretty early. Like, Abby learns about Owen's current girlfriend, pregnancy, Mel, right? Mel's pregnancy, like, right away.
Yeah.
And you can tell it bothers her.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you don't really know much about it, but their relationship, they're back and forth there. We weren't really great for each other in that moment. There was some stuff that got in our way. And it's a really beautiful relationship that, it's just one of the best relationships in video games. What Last of Us is great at is doing relationships and things in video games that we have never seen before.
Right. Well, I'd just say making them realistic.
Yeah, right. Well,
just you don't see it.
Yes, realistic, yes. But also, like, that, but also, like, the game development thing. Like, two full stories of different characters in a game. You don't see that either. You don't see realistic relationships where they can be on and off again. Where you're thinking about another person, which there's just, it's just so good. And the way that they come back to each other.
Talking about Abby and Owen, the way that
Abby and Owen, they come back to each other, and it shows because Abby was kind of done, and then he kind of frames like some of her mindset because he leaves their little stadium sanctuary because he doesn't like things the way that they are.
He felt shame because he tried to stand up. I'm not going to say stand up for, but he tried to have mercy on a Seraphite,
right?
And at the expense of the life of one of his own comrades, which is kind of something that Abby ended up experiencing also. She started to sympathize or have sympathy for a couple of Seraphites, and she knew that she was not welcome back at the stadium.
And I also think that leads her to slow down and not just want to straight up murder Ellie later. Like I think that's part of there's like a forgiveness like line in Abby's story that we get to, which leads me to Lev.
Sure.
The Seraphite that you meet. And then look, Lev doesn't love being a Seraphite.
Right.
Like her and was it her sister? It was her sister, right?
Yeah, I forget the sister's name.
Yeah, I forget the sister's name, but you run into the sister or Lev and then her sister or whatever.
Yeah.
And they are like kind of on the way out, but they're still a part of this group.
Yeah.
And Abby's forced to be with them. And there's a moment where she has to choose to protect them when one of them gets injured.
Right.
And it just shows so much growth as she goes along. So between Owen kind of broadening her horizons on how to think about things, and then also Lev, you see her changing away from, being a lot like Ellie to like, all I'm going to do is revenge. And then she moves away from that. Yeah. And then now she's starting to be around these people who she had this preconceived notion about. And now she's like, well, they're people too.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful thing. Yeah. And to be honest, I really started rooting for them as they started going on their journey. Sure. I mean, and then there's the whole arm thing where it's so good. Any thoughts on Abby and Lev's relationship?
Yeah, I thought it was, and it's that the relationship that Abby and Lev had was a lot like the relationship that Joel and Ellie had, where it's like, I don't understand you. I think I'm mad at you at first. But then we learn more about each other, and what Ellie did for Joel, because in the beginning of the first game, Joel was just an angry, exhausted smuggler who hated the world. He and Tess were apparently like kind of sketchy people, not doing great things. And Ellie,
they did what they had to survive, I guess.
And Ellie kind of pulled him out of that anger and was like, hey, you're allowed to be a human again. And Abby, I think, experienced some of that with Lev, where all she thought about was destroying Joel, and then, consequently destroying Ellie. And Lev kind of pulled her out of that, said, hey, like, you're allowed to let go of all this chaos inside of you. You're allowed to just be a human again. I liked it. I know a lot of people just, they stop at, hey, I don't want to be Abby. She killed Joel. Everything about her story, I'm just going to automatically hate.
There's a lot of in this. Again, this is why this game is so divisive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of points in this game where I don't think you should, but I totally understand why you would put it down.
Yeah.
Joel dies. It really sucks.
Yeah.
It's annoying. You're not crazy about Ellie yet until you get through this game, because at the end of this game, you're like, yeah, Ellie's cool.
Yeah.
And so like, boom, you put it down. And then so now you finally come to grips that you're Ellie, and you're like, all right, great. And then boom, hard stop, now you're Abby.
Yeah.
People probably put the game down there too, and I totally get it, because it's a big ask to get you to want to be invested in another character, and I totally get that. Yeah. But the beauty of this game is that they do if you give it the chance, it's such a beautiful thing to start caring about these characters, what they do with these characters. And to like be invested in the characters. I guess invested is a better term than caring about them.
Sure, yeah.
But you are invested in these characters. And it's another thing where now you're Abby. So boom, you're Abby now. And all these people that you saw when they killed Joel, now you see all those people that were there for the death. Yeah. And you're starting to learn about these people, and you're starting to figure out about their lives. And you see some of them live, some of them die. And it all leads to this big moment at the theater, because that's the whole thing. Right. You play as Abby. You have these relationships with Lev and Owen and your own I guess the wolves, because she's a wolf. Yeah. And then the Seraphites, which is a great addition, a third faction. Yeah. In a world like this, it just makes a whole lot of sense that there'd be just people grouping up all over the place. The world is ending. You're in a post-apocalyptic world, and
I just had to look up the sister's name, Yara. Just so we we don't forget.
Yeah, Yara. And you're meeting all these people, and then we all know what's coming. The second it splits, and you know that Ellie is on her way to try and fight Abby, and then Abby breaks in, and then boom, you're Abby, and you're going through this. You know it's all leading to this. Yeah. And it's a beautiful first fight. Like, because I believe you play it as Abby.
The fight, you're Abby.
Yeah, the fight, you're Abby, and they do a great job of doing this thing where, like, they have the computer Ellie play exactly like you would.
Yeah.
She's stealthy.
Dropping landmines.
Dropping
and,
bombs. It is one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced in a video game. It's like, oh, so this is what it would be like to play against me.
Yeah.
Like as I'm playing as Ellie. I'm dropping mines.
Yeah.
I'm throwing grenades. I'm impossible to see.
Yeah.
Because you play Last of Us basically in cover.
Yeah.
And so it's like, whoa. And Abby, you do play like that, but not necessarily as much. Because she's very like, I'll walk up to you and punch you in the mouth because I'm fucking jacked.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. Oh, another thing before I get off of Abby, before we get into this fight, it's interesting to see her have built up her body because of how weak she felt in multiple moments, whether it was when her dad died or just a ton of situations that they do flashbacks to. Like, she built herself so that she can withstand anything in this world, which is
I wonder if it... So
awesome.
Like there, in the first scene you have with Abby at the stadium, you walk past like a very nice athletic gym, you know, and I wonder if she just like didn't.
It's the stadium gym. It's the one for the football players.
And so like what I felt walking past that gym wasn't so much, oh, Abby wants to get big and tough so that she can overcome things. I think it's kind of like you when you work out. It's like, I don't really know what else to do, but I find solace in exercise.
Okay.
Like I feel confident when I'm lifting weights, not because there's an end goal in mind. It's just like, this is what and maybe it stems from an insecurity. I'm sure it does, because she obviously was like a stick figure in the flashbacks, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's not something she had her whole life. I think it was just an answer to her traumas. Yeah.
It also is a beautiful thing that you see later on, and we'll talk about the ending. How shocking it is to see her at the end. But we'll get there. Great fight. Yeah. It's one of the best fights in gaming. Just to understand your enemy, but not understand your enemy, because you know that she's going to be very stealthy and hard.
Are you talking about the scene where they're in the lake with the boat?
No. We're still talking about the first fight. Okay. We'll get there though. Yeah. Like it's the red light. Yeah. It's like she has an opportunity to kill you. Yeah. At the end of that first fight, like
Lev stops her.
Yes, exactly. And again, it just goes down that path of Lev seems to be like her path to forgiveness. Like that's her guide, and that's another moment, because Ellie has another moment where she could or could not kill someone, and she mows that. Not Darcy, but so she's about to kill Nora, and she decides to kill Nora, and that's the big difference. Again, that's the big difference between the characters. You see a similar situation, and one person is still consumed by her desire to commit revenge or take revenge on people, and the other one has someone that's guiding her, which will affect Ellie later on in the story and costs her big time.
And you kind of see that when, and this is it's so subtle the way they do it, and you almost have to be like very acutely aware of what goes on in the human heart and the human condition to understand everything that these characters experience. But when they're in this building and they hear on a radio that, hey, there's a sniper messing us up. You know, the wolves are saying, hey, there's a sniper messing us up. We need backup. And what's the guy? Dina's baby daddy.
Jesse.
Yeah. So, you know, they hear on the radio, hey, there's a sniper messing us up over here. We need backup. And Jesse says, that might be Tommy. We should probably worry about that.
Yep.
And Ellie says, no, man, we have a goal. We're going after Abby. We're going to go get Abby. And
she's very single-minded in her.
Very single-minded. And I think part of her knows that Jesse is right. And I don't know if the animators did this, but when I was watching it, like I feel like you can just tell, like somewhere inside of her, she knows that Jesse is right, but she's not willing to give up Abby. And so she tries to justify, no, we're going after Abby. And so she loses her scope. She loses her ability to discern and make sound decisions because she's so consumed with just the one goal of revenge.
Yeah. So we have that confrontation. It affects Ellie because she hasn't really lost like that before. No one's like kind of overcome her that way, and so she kind of continues down her journey. Yeah. And then Abby falls into some crap, and Ellie goes home. And so you have these side-by-side stories now. Instead of one, then the other, now they're side-by-side. Yeah. So Abby's continuing her journey, just kind of making her way, and then they get captured, and it's bad news. And then Ellie makes her way back home, and she finds Dina, who now has the kid that she just birthed. And life is kind of perfect for Ellie.
Yeah.
Like, they get the farm that they allude to when they're talking in the city. They allude to it beautifully in the city when they're on the horse and they're walking around. And she really makes the choice to choose revenge over the family. And Dina's like, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Like, it's not worth it. You've already tried. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
Everything is perfect. There's nothing you're going to gain from this anymore. Like, you tried and you lost. It's okay. Like, you don't need to chase that life.
Yeah.
And she chooses the life. And Dina's like, I can't be a part of this. And then she leaves, which is just awful. Like, it's just like, if you were like me, I'm just like, don't do it.
Yeah.
You're making a stupid choice.
I think that Ellie doesn't want to do it, but she has she has PTSD. You know, when she drops the hoe in the barn, and you know she has that flashback, and she feels like she's surrounded. You know, and she feels like the only way she can get rid of her PTSD is to finish it.
Yeah, because she has the visions and the baby. Yeah. It's so tough. So she decides to do it, and she goes after her. And ironically, she saves Abby. Yeah. Like, all said and done, she runs through those guys. It nearly kills her, too. Yeah. Like, it really...
she gets... she gets... Oh, no, she gets impaled on the tree. And,
she's stabbed. She's shot.
Yeah.
She's fighting she's exhausted. Yeah. And then you find Abby, and she's clinging to life. Yeah. Like, she is... You know, she's almost dead. Yeah. And she gives you a good fight. Yeah. And it's what we were alluding to earlier. Sure. Or she built her body up to be very strong. Yeah. And you see her at her weakest. Yeah. And to be honest, at this point, now she's your equal. Yeah. Because she's basically the same size as you. Right. She's a lot more tired, which is basically why the fight goes the way it does. But it costs Ellie big time. Again, it's not just in Dina, but now one of the things that gave her peace, her ability to play the guitar.
Her connection to Joel through the guitar.
Yeah, her connection to Joel through the guitar. Like, everything that made her life comfortable was her journey for revenge on these other people cost her the things that she loves in life. Yeah. And again, it's so beautifully done. It's nuts, and it's not like there's nothing forced about it. It's all very natural. Yeah. This happens because this happens, and it all makes sense. Yeah. And the end of the game is kind of leaves you there. Yeah. Like, she made a poor decision. It's almost like I don't think this is a game that's preaching to you, look, revenge is bad, but it's very clear that...
Well, it's saying revenge revenge can be... Revenge like, I think the game is saying, look, if you want revenge, go for it. Just understand it's not going to satisfy you the way you think it will. Yep. You're probably going to end up with less than you had before. Yeah. It's not saying don't do it. It's saying do it if you want. Just be aware. You know? Yeah.
And it's one of the best... The two moments at the farm at the very end are just fantastic. Yeah. Seeing Abby leave with Lev, which again, it could be its own game. Yeah. Like, that could be its own game. If they were like, yeah, we're doing an Abby sequel, and it had nothing to do with it, I'd be like, all right, yeah. Or if they were like, yeah, we're going to do an Ellie sequel, and then that's it. And then maybe they meet up, or maybe they don't. Like,
they go get coffee.
They've built two three-dimensional, deep characters that you could... There's just a franchise there. Sure. And now the creators of this game... Neil Druckmann was saying that, we do have an outline for a third one. We haven't started it yet, so no one start this whole rumor mill. We have an outline.
Last I heard was like, look, I think the story's kind of over.
No, about 2 months ago. Okay. He said, we do have an outline, but there's nothing planned right now. We're working on other things. Yeah. And, I would love for them to come back to this. I don't necessarily know if I want them to just jump right into it again. I'd love to see them do something else and then come back to it. Give a little space.
Sure.
But... It's one of the best endings in games, one of the best games in general. Yeah. But for my kind of final thoughts on this game, I get why people would put this down. Yeah. There's a lot of moments there's a lot of big things that you have to overcome to want to, get through this story and experience this story. But if you do make that choice, kind of like Ellie, if you make that choice, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, it's and this is what, oh man, like, because we were saying earlier, Ellie had almost no character development. You see her choose anger, exist in anger, end in anger, and then she ends up with nothing. She loses everything. Even her losing the fingers, I think, was in my opinion, way more significant than losing Dina.
Yep.
Because she lost Joel.
Yeah.
Right. She lost Joel when she lost her fingers, and that You know, whereas Abby, she was the one that got to experience some growth and character development.
Yeah, and her life is better for it.
Yeah.
She's no longer with people she doesn't want to be. Now she lost some people along the way.
Yeah.
But
she gained Lev. She got away from Seattle, you know. She doesn't have Owen with her, and, you know, that sucks, but she still has life in front of her, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great game. Any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Gameplay was freaking sweet.
Yeah, the gameplay is there was that story that Xbox, so the leaks from the Epic and the Apple thing is coming out, and we're learning all about like what people are talking about behind the scenes, and then Xbox had like they were called in to be a part of that, and some of those leaks were Xbox breaking down their competition and how good or bad they are, which it makes sense. Every company's going to have that, but the Xbox kind of review or the breakdown of Last of Us was like they have created something over that is spectacular, but like you can tell that like the guy is trying to like save his job. Like, yeah, here's like some deep insight. Like The Last of Us doesn't have very good like shooter mechanics and gameplay mechanics, and it's just like everyone who saw that article was like total bullshit. This game plays so good, and it's just funny to see that the competition doesn't have anything that matches this. And even though he says that about the game Last of Us, he says that what Naughty Dog is doing is unmatched. And you just can't deny that. It's something that he is suggesting that Xbox tries to focus on and tries to have something like this.
Well, there are things about
just don't.
The Last of Us, and I'm not going to talk about other Naughty Dog games, but in The Last of Us, it's so simple, right? They don't have like, customize your armor. There really aren't RPG elements at all, other than like how you want to craft your gun. But so they keep it simple and they pour everything into their characters, which is what makes it great.
Yeah, sometimes there was a guy, I don't remember who was talking about it. It was a writer, and he was talking about how small stories will impact you greater than big stories. And he was talking about like when the world is on the line, you know that Batman, Superman, or the Avengers, the world is not going to end. And if it does, it'll come back somehow. Yeah. Whereas if it's a smaller story, something like The Last of Us with individuals, anything can happen. Anyone can die, and anything can happen. Like the world is not at stake. Like
it can end in a tragedy.
It can end terribly, whereas those movies really can't, or those larger stories can't. So it's stories like this that'll affect you the most, I think. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We hoped you liked this 1-year anniversary edition Last of Us review, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.